Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Salon Series 2023. I'm just going to let people filter in for a bit. And while that's happening, if y'all want to just let us know where you're coming from, myself and the panelists are from all over today. I am experiencing a mildly wants it to be sunny Boston right now. Then as you all are doing that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the wonderful opportunities and lectures that are coming up through the next few weeks and actually into the next few months here at Letterform Archive. One of these is an in-person lecture, but the rest are virtual or have a virtual option. So again, welcome. If you just got let in from the magical Zoom filing system, I don't even know. Sorry, y'all. It's been a weird morning. As you're coming in, just again, let us know where you're coming from in the chat. We love to see how much of a global audience we end up having with these events. And for this talk and for all of our talks, if you would like to use the Q&A function, we will get to your actual questions at the end of the talk. You can also drop them in the chat, but the folks will be mostly looking at the Q&A button. The chat goes too fast for us to keep track of questions there. Also, please note that the recording of the salon will be available on our event website for 1 week to the general public. After this event is recorded, and then it will be available only to members after that point. And if you are interested in Letterform Archive membership, please join us. There's lots of great opportunities that happen through members. So our next event is another in this series, Call and Response, Histories of Designing Protest with Ana Lorente and Jose Menendez. That will be hosted by Silas Monroe, who is on this call today. Thank you much. And that one will be similar to this one, except it's more of history of designing protest. So charting the history of the material used to strike through myriad forms of oppression is an art form in itself. The speakers in this panel will share their research and curatorial practices on the history of protest movements from across North America and the Caribbean. This is two design history experts that will enhance and close out Letterform Archive's exhibition Strike Through. If you're in the Bay Area and you still haven't seen it, get on in. It's coming down soon. A moment here. Next, this event is actually sold out, but sign up for it anyway because a recording will be sent to you. This is an in-person lecture with Joanna Drucker on inventing the alphabet, origin stories to forensic evidence. This is a vividly illustrated in-person talk that explores the origin and development of the alphabet. You can sign up for it here. I'm going to drop y'all all a link. Thank you so much for the links in there, Stu. And then next are a handful of workshops. So we've got Putting Pencil to Pixel with Angie Che going on Thursdays from May 25th to June 15th. Unlock the power of the iPad to create dynamic, polished, and punchy lettering. No previous Procreate or lettering experience is required. This looks like a pretty fun one for anybody looking for some enhanced lettering skills this summer. And then finally, back by ever popular demand, Introduction to Modern Type Design. This one was with Fur Kotze. And making type is fun. Anybody who's tried it knows. Learn how to create a typeface from sketch to screen and everything in between. This is a 10-week online class, and each participant will gain an understanding of methodologies and processes used to produce digital typefaces today. And then finally, and thank you all so much for your patience as everybody filtered in, a letter form lecture, Hidden Diversities, Lessons from 4 Centuries of Javanese Script Heritage. Take a trip to Java, where 4 centuries of script, calligraphy, and typography leave a treasure trove of inspiration for designers. That's an online lecture with Adita Bayu Perdana. So if you just filtered in and wow, the numbers keep climbing, it's kind of amazing. I just wanted to throw one shout out to our last salon, and this is the last day that that the general public will be able to see it on our website. So if you miss it today, you have to become a member to join, which we will not be sad to have you in our cohort of people. Recovering the Forgotten Women of Metal Type. Bethany Qualls did a great job last week talking about her deep research in the archive. She was our first fellow. She got a grant to do some research on metal type and found all these known and very much unknown women. So if you are interested in women in metal type, please check that out. It was a fabulous lecture. So like you've seen in the chat, please learn more at letarc.org/events. And without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Steve, who is our moderator for today's salon, Designer as Protestor. So if you need an introduction to Stephen Coles, here it is. He is our associate curator and editorial director. He joined the staff after serving on our board of directors since its very inception. Since the early 2000s, he's been active in the type community, initially as creative director at Font Shop and later as an independent consultant, connecting font makers with font users. He wrote The Anatomy of Type and co-founded Typographica and Fonts in Use. And with his background in design and journalism and a deep and abiding love and obsession for type history, Stephen is responsible for the online face and voice of the archive. I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for organizing this and making it run so smoothly. It's such a pleasure to come back and talk to some of the creators that are featured in Strike Through. When Silas and I worked on this exhibition, I mean, starting actually years ago, but as we were starting to hang the exhibition and talk to a lot of these creators, we really were excited to then have them talk to you. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do with the show is have you all meet the faces behind these designs, and especially in a show like this, which has so much poignancy and relevance to a lot of different important topics that are addressed in the work. And so it's really great, especially for these 4 people to be in this virtual room and speaking to you all. I'm not going to spend too much time on introductions because I know there's a lot of really amazing stuff that they're planning to present. But we're going to start with Design as Play, and that's Angie, Wang, and Mark Fox, who are such partners in design and life that they're in the same screen down here, which I think is awesome. And they've been really incredible partners with Letter from Archive for a long time, not only in donating work, the work that they've done themselves, but also in connecting their students to the archive. We have had many classes come through that are taught by these educators, and that's really kind of combining all the things we try to do with the archive, is not only collect material, but also to be an educational resource. So Angie and Mark have been really an important part of that, and it was a real pleasure to include multiple pieces of theirs in the show. And there's much more that we have in the collection and more that they have to talk about. So I'm going to turn it over to them now. Thank you, Angie and Mark.
Thank you, Stephen, Sarah, and Silas, and the Letterform Archive for inviting us here today. It's also nice to see so many folks from around the world joining the Salon. So before we start our presentation, Mark and I will tell you a little bit about ourselves. And I'm going to share our screen now. Sorry, this wasn't it. There we go. So Mark and I run the graphic design studio, Design Display in San Francisco. I specialize in packaging design, typography, typographic systems, and screen-based work.
On the other half of Play, I specialize in trademark design, custom type treatments. I love logos. I love symbols, so much so that we wrote a book about them. This is our book, Symbols, A Handbook for Seeing, which was published by the Monticelli Press in 2016. And here's a few spreads. This is the serpent section and the cat section.
We also teach in the graphic design program at California College of the Arts, as Stephen mentioned. This is Mark's 30th year at the college. And I've been teaching typography for 19 years.
The salon is titled Designer as Protestor, or as we like to think about it, highly opinionated cranks armed with the knowledge of type and image. Angie and I also design and publish agitprop posters. And here we are hanging posters before the 2020 presidential election. So Angie and I built our presentation around the title of the Letterform Archive exhibit, Strike Through. We loosely organized this talk around three themes: form, voice, and dissemination. Striking through, overprinting, cancellations, and forced juxtapositions. In graphic design, overprinting is used to correct or amend. In propaganda and protest art, it can be used to subvert the original message or force a juxtaposition. This impulse can be irrelevant and juvenile, as in this Marcel Duchamp piece. It's a detail. Or it can be chilling in its effectiveness. This is a Polish postage stamp overprinted during the Nazi occupation of 1940. Here is a suffragette defaced penny with the phrase "Votes for Women" stamped across King Edward VII's profile around 1903. Although it may look tame to our eyes, this defacement was a radical, even criminal act. Nearly 75 years later, Jamie Reed defaced the Queen of England for the Sex Pistols' second single, ironically titled "God Save the Queen." Not surprisingly, the BBC refused to play the song. After 9/11, President George W. Bush asked all good Americans to go shopping. My response was this piece: "Patriotism does not equal consumption" is overprinted onto dollar bills. Ivan Cash and Andy Dow in one of the bills from their 2011 series, Occupy George. Rubber stamped with information about the wage gap, money is an especially apt vehicle for messages about income inequality. Comedian Dick Gregory ran for president in 1968 as the writing candidate of the Freedom and Peace Party. His campaign issued these counterfeit dollar bills, which swap out George Washington for Gregory himself. More forced juxtapositions. This is a Get Out the Vote poster I designed for the 2004 US presidential election. As the recently launched Iraq War was foremost in my mind, I wanted anyone who read the vote to have to first look through the death notice of an American soldier. The poster displayed on Market Street in San Francisco. And letterpress printer Amos Kennedy reminding everyone that someone died for your right to vote. Amos overprints this text on a map of Alabama, the southern state where the Ku Klux Klan shot and killed civil rights activist Viola Liuzzo in 1965. A temporal form of overprinting can be achieved through projection. I think of it as ephemeral monumentality. Here, Robin Bell projects a message onto the facade of Trump International Hotel. And seen from the Mexican side of the border, Jill Marie Holzen projects the image of a ladder against the back of one of Trump's border wall prototypes. Following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, Dustin Klein used projections to recontextualize the Jefferson Davis Memorial in Richmond, Virginia. The curving text says, "Don't celebrate slave owners." Klein's projection on the Robert E. Lee Monument is especially powerful. Using only light, Klein transforms a moment of repression. Transforms a monument of repression into a memorial for George Floyd, and by extension, for all of the other unarmed Black men and women who've been killed by the police. Striking back, harnessing the power of type and symbol. This is the personal symbol of A.M. Cassandra, the French poster artist. His view of how graphic design should function seems clear. In the summer of 2016, Angie and I became increasingly disturbed by Donald Trump's candidacy. We worried that he was racist, divisive, and had fascistic tendencies. We issued the poster Trump 24K gold-plated as a warning. The design of 4 rotating letter T's is stamped in metallic gold foil and registered embossed. It's blingy, which is not the expected voice of a protest poster. At the time we wrote, "Let's be clear. For some Americans, the attractive aspects of Donald Trump's public persona can obscure his repellent views." It took us a few attempts to find the right voice or the appropriate visual language. Here's an earlier design juxtaposing our Trump T monogram with Hillary's H monogram. We even made a bumper sticker that almost no one understood. We also made a sticker that was too literal in its associations. We weren't accusing Donald Trump of being a Nazi, but we were noting that he trafficked in coded hate speech and played footsie with white supremacists. The visual language we arrived at was meant to mirror Trump's personal tastes, which meant that some folks were unclear about our intentions. Is the poster for or against? A curator in Germany wrote us, "There was some funny incident at the customs. They actually believed that there was gold on the print and that it belonged to Trump personally and therefore must be worth a lot. It took some explaining about satire and irony to get the poster out of customs." The design became a kind of political Rorschach test, which led to its use in memes, like this one. The day after the election, several European museums contacted us to add the poster to their collections, but not here in the States. Only the Letterform Archive, the Center for the Study of Political Graphics in Los Angeles, and the Visual Arts Foundation in New York have been willing to accession the poster. Although the Library of Congress did quietly take it in, with no image of the poster though. One of the little understood responsibilities of the artist is to bear witness in an almost religious sense, Joyce Carol Oates. In the summer of 2020, Angie and I felt compelled to bear witness to Trump's lies and its corrosive effects on the country. We kickstarted 3 posters, the first of which, Trump, Lord of the Lies, riffed on our design from 4 years before. In this version, 4 flies, agents of pestilence and rot, issue from the central motif. Via platforms like Twitter and Fox News, Trump's lies were a contagion that spread to the 4 corners of the earth. The poster in San Francisco's Mission District before the election. And the other 2 posters we kickstarted, a diptych with the text, "White Lies Matter." For the version on Black, we used James Edmondson's typeface, "Swear Smoke." At the time we wrote, like his white lies, at-real Donald Trump is a fake, a delusory, vaporous exhalation of hate and fear.
Striking with, from the vernacular to the unexpected. The dissemination of political messages is a perennial consideration, whether it's finding ways to reach the masses or evade authority. I'll start by showing some examples of state-sanctioned propaganda. Candy wrappers by Russian constructivists Radchenko and Mayakovsky. Images of tools and machines celebrate industrialization and the working classes, while the texts vilify the rich. The text on the left wrapper reads, Vice, the landowner took to whiskey. Outrage, the bourgeoisie was pinched in the vice. Nihon means the land of the rising sun, and the Japanese flag is commonly known as the Hinomaru, literally circle of the sun. In the 1930s, the Hinomaru motif came to embody Japan's imperial expansions into China. The Hinomaru bento is a boxed lunch of white rice with a pickled red plum in the center, symbolizing the Japanese flag. Originating in 1937, it was served to students every Monday as a show of solidarity with troops fighting in China. By 1939, Hinomaru bentos had become a popular patriotic lunch among Japanese citizens. Japanese propaganda kimonos emerged at the beginning of the 20th century. Their patterns initially championed symbols of progress, such as trains, skyscrapers, and airplanes. But as the culture of war saturated Japanese society, it became common for propaganda kimonos to glorify military power. This is a detail from a girl's kimono. This silk kimono depicts General Matsui Iwane entering Nanking, China on December 13, 1937. Pivoting from propaganda to protest. In 2003, the Dutch foundation Mediamatic created an installation aimed at normalizing medically safe abortions. Activists sailed to waters off Ireland and Poland, where the practice was illegal, to perform abortions in international waters. This dress, with its statement of fact, was part of the installation. Brick by Brick is a public art performance that builds human walls against misogyny. Participants wear brick patterned jumpsuits bearing misogynistic statements made by Donald Trump. Here are the jumpsuits in action. The Book Block in Rome, 2010. Protesting government proposals to cuts in education, students used DIY shields made to look like oversized books to protect themselves from riot police. The symbolism of culture defending itself against the threat of violence is profound. This book block protest was staged in London. The umbrella movement emerged during the Hong Kong democracy protests of 2014. Protesters used umbrellas as tools to protect themselves from the pepper spray used by the police. Protesters occupied the city of Hong Kong for 79 days. Mariah is a mobile app that uses augmented reality to connect the opioid epidemic to the Sackler family. This technology is a new platform for education and protest, and we look forward to hearing more about it from Heather and Adam later. Striking with archiving, curating, and disseminating. In the last 10 years, museums and public archives have emerged as unexpected venues for the documentation, presentation, and dissemination of political discourse as expressed through graphic design. In 2018, we were asked by designer Merkel Illich to contribute to the Tolerance Project, a traveling poster show on the topic of tolerance. I worked with calligrapher John Stevens to typographically interpret this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. The project is committed to reaching people who don't ordinarily visit galleries or museums, and posters are often exhibited outdoors in unconventional spaces. Here, the posters are reproduced as giant stickers affixed to the campus grounds of a university in New York. Hung above the streets in Croatia, exhibited on city buses, in the pedestrian walkway as part of the Pride Festival in Budapest, on window shutters in Slovenia. This is one of my favorite applications. Mark's poster projected outdoors in Croatia. In Dubai, Mark's poster, as well as several others, were removed due to their sensitive nature. Rather than leaving them out of the show altogether, the curator included the posters as a sculpture in the middle of the room so that there was an opportunity for discussion. We thought this was a creative way to be transparent about censorship. Since launching in 2017, the Tolerance Project has traveled to over 40 countries. After the 26th US presidential election, arts institutions have taken on a central role in the dissemination of protest art. That's me below a very big poster announcing a show of protest posters at the Museum for Gestalten in Zurich in 2018. One of the galleries of the protest exhibit. In the same year, Hope to Nope Graphics and Politics 2008 to 18 opened at London's Design Museum. Strike Through typographic messages of protests opened at our beloved Letterform archive last summer. And most recently, What Would You Say? Activist graphics from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art opened at the Vincent Price Art Museum in LA. And Mark has a piece in the show, the poster Tricky Ollie, which you can see on the far right. And the show just opened last month and will be up until the end of June. So if you're in the LA area, please check it out.
A civilization is not destroyed by wicked people. It is not necessary that people be wicked, but only that they be spineless. James Baldwin. Designer and printer David Lance Coins juxtaposes the Latin phrase, silence gives consent, with Czech civilians throwing rocks at invading Russian tanks in 1968. Avram Finkelstein designed this identity to combat institutional silence surrounding homophobia and HIV/AIDS around 1986. The phrase silence equals death carries the authority of a mathematical equation. The calligrapher Hunter Saxony III from his series Nia Wilson, Say Your Name, No Silence. 18-year-old Nia Wilson was murdered in Oakland BART station in 2018. Spanish artist Marisa Maestra's 2016 design, Don't Shut Up, for the campaign Say No to Gender Violence. Maestra appropriates the silhouette of cancellation and X to create a portal for speech. We must speak with all the humility that is appropriate to our limited vision, but we must speak. Martin Luther King Jr. In February 1968, 1,300 sanitation workers went on strike in Memphis, Tennessee to demand higher wages and improved working conditions. On March 28th, roughly a month and a half after the strike began, martial law was declared in Memphis. When the sanitation workers marched on March 29th, they were flanked by 4,000 soldiers from the Tennessee National Guard and tanks. Their rallying cry? A simple declaration of shared humanity. I am a man. After slogans were banned in 2020 under a new Chinese national security law, Hong Kong protesters resorted to displaying blank white sheets of paper. Even in their enforced silence, the citizens of Hong Kong refused to give consent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. We could have used that as an introduction to our entire exhibition when we first opened it. I can't believe the great overview of protest that is, and I learned so many new things, so many new projects from that. I really appreciate all the work you put into that, Mark and Angie. For those of you who had questions for them, please hold them to the end. We'll hear from Adam and Heather now, but then we'll have a discussion time after that. But thanks again, that was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So we now welcome to the virtual stage Heather Snyder Quinn and Adam DelMarcelle. And you can read more about them in the event page. But I just from a personal point of view, I can say what a pleasure it is to work with these two. I got to participate in their special version of Mariah, which they'll talk about for Strike Through. And we went all around the Bay Area stenciling concrete. I learned a lot about that. I learned that people don't really care if you do. So just get out there and do it. And it was a really amazing experience to see the dedication that these two have to their work and to their causes. And so it's a real honor to have them as part of the show and also as part of this event. So I know we're also going to learn a lot from these two, and thank you for being part of it, Heather and Adam.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for having us. We're honored to be here.
I'm going to share my screen.
Can I say something real quick, Heather, before we start? You can share the
Yeah.
screen, but I just want to say something because if we don't get to it, I want to make sure that I comment on it. I was spending some time like checking out the comments on the social media, like the Instagram feed for this event, and there's some really great things that were said in there. And one of them that I think everyone here needs to take away is I think that the strongest form of protest or activism that we can kind of bring forward as designers is being ethical in who we decide to bring form to, right? Not all designers and artists can stand behind the megaphone or in front of the megaphone and protests like the artists that are in this room, but probably the most dangerous form of activism and protest that we can do right now is be ethical in what designers bring form to, right? And forget about the idea that, you know, if I don't take this job, I can't eat tomorrow. Like, this may come from a privileged place, possibly, but what I've found in my life, and I've done a lot of hard jobs in my life. I was a social worker for 20 years. I did all these things. Making money is the easy part. Living with integrity and is hard. So think about who you decide to work for. And that, because that is a massive form of protest against a capitalist system that kind of runs all of the shit we're going to talk about today. So it's just important to say.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I can't remember if I unmuted.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. I also want to thank you for including us in this tremendous show. I had a crush on Letterform Archive forever. So to be part of this show with Silas and Steve it's pretty amazing. We are going to show a pretty meaty project. As you'll see, it is activist at many, many, many levels. And despite the number of times Adam and I have shared this project, it in a way gets harder and harder to explain. And so I just want to open the dialogue kindly. We're going to talk about some heavily technical things, some very deep socio-political things, and there's no silly questions along the way. We've tried to make it as informative as possible. But for me, being an anxious and nervous activist, I think one of the most important things we can do in our design and technology spaces is ask questions fearlessly. So we are going to walk you through Mariah, the future of protest. Mariah is an augmented reality experience that narrates stories of historical injustice. So we will talk to you about who Mariah is and where this project began, and then we will show you how it manifested in the Letterform Archive show. So thank you for those who went right before us. You didn't know it, but you had a James Baldwin, and so here we do too. So that feels like a perfect entry point. Adam, I don't know if you want to say anything specific.
Sure. I mean, Baldwin is just like, I mean, one of my mentors is in this room right now, Silas. Turned me on to James Baldwin. He gave me my first James Baldwin book to read, and it changed my life. It gave me a roadmap of what it means to be human, what it should mean to be American. And I think he really should be the North Star of anyone that wants to do work in the vein of what we're talking about right now. So can't say enough about James Baldwin.
So just sort of a brief overview of who we are. I'm Heather Snyder Quinn. I see myself in lots of different ways, an educator, a designer, a futurist. I have been teaching and working since 1996, so I have a pretty long career in aspects of big tech. And currently I'm an assistant professor of design futures at Washington University. I'll let Adam give his bio, but we met in graduate school, and we'll tell you a little bit how that relationship evolved as well.
So I'm an educator also. I teach at a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, Wilson College. I'm an artist, an activist, even though I'm not crazy about that term. I like to look at myself as an activated member of my community. I don't know if activist really means anything. Yeah, that's who I am.
Yeah. This is a little video of Mariah as a child. I'm going to play that in the background as we talk about how Adam and I met. So Adam and I met at a low residency graduate program called Vermont College of Fine Arts. That's also where we met Silas, who is one of our advisors. Both of us in our respective work were dabbling in different forms of activism or rethinking the systems and structures that exist. So in my case, I was really reusing corporate tools in ways they weren't intended. I was hacking AI and AR. I was, putting protests on Google Street View and trying to hack their algorithm, and doing a lot with augmented reality. Adam, on the other hand, was, I'm gonna let you take it over.
So I came to the Vermont College of Fine Art, just having lost a brother to an overdose. So I came there with the hope that I was going to be able to work that out. And thankfully, VCA gave me the space and the time and the support to be able to try to figure that out. It's going to take my whole life to figure that out. But I came there with an idea of trying to mold my career as a social worker that I had had for so many years, now being an artist. I came to a point where I couldn't do social work anymore after my brother died, that my compartmentalization of my life that I built to kind of protect myself when you work in high stress work like that kind of went away when my brother died. So I couldn't do that work anymore. So I decided to go back to where I kind of should have probably been all along, which was making art. And I started making art as a way to process the grief of my brother's loss of my brother, and to think about the way the system handled my family in the process of someone dying from overdose in America. Kind of in 2014, this is when the overdose epidemic is starting to really take form. We're losing more and more people every moment, and we're trying to figure things out. And I came to start doing work to try to figure this out. And that started in the form of poster bombing my entire town with screen printed posters, which the police destroyed, to then turning to digital projections of buildings. So if the police didn't like a 13 by 19 inch poster, now they get a 30-foot by 80-foot projection on the side of a building. And then it's now moved into this kind of collaboration with Heather and I in this realm that literally there are no laws that are able to stop yet. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, so in both of our cases, we were, sort of challenging power systems. And the project that sort of evolved from that, Project Mariah, really challenges multiple systems in power: capitalist, technocratic, political, legal, and societal. In this project, we essentially virtually hacked into the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we re-augmented Sackler donated artifacts with audio and video and statistics about the opioid epidemic. The statistics are global, so they talk about, the broad umbrella pieces of the epidemic, but simultaneously you're hearing the story of one person, of Mariah, who the app is named for. Do you want to talk about Mariah, Adam?
Yeah, so just to give context too, like the Sackler families, if you don't know who that is, and that's okay. Like I'm doing this work, it's all I think about, and I always assume that people know what's going on outside of their house, and in most cases they don't, because they're just so wrapped up in the world. So the Sackler family made a drug called OxyContin, the most powerful opioid pain medication ever produced up to that point. They falsely marketed it through the use of unethical graphic designers, like I was talking about. And they put it into places where people felt safe prescribing something that they were told was non-addictive, but ended up being just as addictive as heroin, and actually more so. So Mariah is one person who died from an OxyContin overdose. Heather, would you go back? Let's play that audio that's in the bottom of that clip.
Yeah.
So the audio that's going to play here, you're going to hear Rhonda Lottie. She actually narrates story as you go through the Met. She tells the story of her daughter while at the
The
same
great
time
halls
you
of this
learn
museum were
about
built with the
sacrifice.
blood and suffering of the working class of America, in the factories, on the plantations, and in the slaughterhouses that built the landscape of this country. Pulling back the fig leaf of culture reveals a sinister plot formed in the crucible of the American dream. Profit over life will be the augmented title of the works that hang in this historic institution. This is the story of one individual that perished so that an oligarch could have their name chiseled into stone. Think of it, ye millionaires of many markets. What glory may yet be yours if you only listen to our advice to convert pork into porcelain, grain and produce into priceless pottery, the rude ore of commerce into sculptured marble, and railroad shares and mining stocks, things which perish without the using, and which in the next financial panic shall surely shrivel like parched scrolls into the glorified canvas of the world's masters that shall adorn these walls for centuries. The race of Wall Street is to hunt the philosopher's stone, to convert all baser things into gold. Metropolitan Museum of Art, 1880.
But what you heard there, the second half of that was written by Thomas Cole, was one of the original calls of action to the JP Morgans, the Mellons, all of these people that were going to fund this museum originally. This was the way that they could put their name on objects that could live and be immortal. So the Egyptian wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was paid for in large part by the Sackler family. Those artifacts that are in there were purchased with the death of 600,000 people in the United States.
That's great. So I'm going to skip over this in a sec, but these are some of so Adam and I had this theory. I had been playing around with augmented reality, and I realized that through something called a trigger image, which I'll talk about, you could essentially augment spaces without ever setting foot in them. And so there was a way to sort of legally trespass. There were no laws yet. Mark Zuckerberg had not coined the metaverse. So we were really exploring uncharted territory. So could we have gone to the Met and done a projection on the outside? Maybe. But we decided to test this other idea, which in essence was creating a multi-layered narrative, looking at new narratives of history, and creating essentially virtual memorials. So renaming these artifacts for what they really were. This is in essence a form of speculative design, which to me is incredibly activist. So the idea that we can use design to tell narrative stories and look at revisionist histories or different futures. And so you'll see the ways in which we do that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing too, is like when Heather and I first started talking about this, it was a kind of a speculative idea. Like, is it even possible to do this thing? And we weren't sure. So the idea of even trying was worthwhile, but then we actually did it, which is pretty amazing.
And so for me, working in big tech, a lot of the ideas of sort of hacking the metaverse and imagining all the ways it could come to life is a way of imagining different kinds of futures. And so imagining the ways we might write policy proactively to carve out this space in a way that's more democratic, for example. So I'm just showing you the futures going. There's a lot of press about the metaverse, for better and for worse. In my case, it doesn't matter if we like it or not. We are playing in that space so that we can understand it and have a voice in it. There's a lot of different words for it. In our case, we're looking at augmented reality. Most of the media that you see talks about the metaverse in terms of this totally siloed world, which is actually virtual reality. We are working in augmented reality, which means that our physical world is augmented with digital stuff on top of it. So if you think of Google Translate or the backup camera on your car, that really is AR, and that's a piece of the metaverse.
Yeah, and the idea of kind of, I mean, for me, the idea of virtual reality, I think this place we live in is incredibly too fucked up for us to be living in some other alternate reality, which is what virtual reality is, right? Augmented reality allows us to augment the world we're in right now with what we might want to see, what we think could be, or what was there. And for museums, I mean, museums are this giant velvet veil that hides a terrible history in a lot of cases behind it, right? So this project was kind of able to pull that veil away and augment the actual space. Instead of putting us inside a museum of what it could be in a virtual world, we're putting things on top of what is here.
Yeah. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but in my earlier AR experiments, in even as far back as 2016, if you think about the way AR can be, how the space around me or my body can be augmented, it's typically done with a trigger image, which is like a QR code. My phone recognizes some data points and it knows to serve you information based on that. Geolocation means it knows where I am in space, and ground plane is like if you've ever used Amazon's place a couch in my room, you click your phone. So those are three methods of placing AR. And so understanding the technology, there were points where I was hacking into my friend's apartment and augmenting secret messages, and that was from a place of play. But really what I started to realize is, what does this mean for the future of our virtual space? And how might we take back some of that space, augment it, test the futures of it? And so that's how the project with Adam and I really came to life. Right now, we're just playing a demo for you, built by our colleagues at Westfield Productions. And this is what's on display at the Strike Through exhibition. And so you can see as your phone with the Mariah app scans these artifacts in the Dender wing, you are fed statistics about the opioid epidemic. What you can't hear in these demos is Rhonda Lottie, Mariah's mother, is telling you stories about her life through the 16 installations that exist there. And then in the final room, the temple is renamed the Mariah Lottie Memorial Gallery. So you can see that there.
Part of this project too, like it was kind of running side by side. There's a group of activists in New York run by Nan Golden, the photographer, who's kind of pushing this idea of having to have the Sackler name removed from all walls of museums. I am adamantly against that idea for the sole purpose or the sole fact that Americans have no sense for digging into our own history. So if we erase that from the walls without replacing it with something that connects to that history directly, it'll be gone forever, right? So the Sacklers, in essence, art washed our culture by giving us these beautiful artifacts that are a velvet curtain. But there's also activists that have now fought to whitewash these spaces and leave it and erase this history. And that's happening. So the Met has since taken down the name. The Louvre has taken down the name. Lots of other places, like under the guise of night, the name just kind of is starting to disappear, meaning that history is going away with it.
So I'm just clicking through some images of the installation itself. What I do just want to call attention to in our process is because I knew how AR worked, and I knew that to augment a space, you just needed a picture of an object. So we had this theory, could we virtually hack this space? And so we built this project during the pandemic. We had a lot of support from DePaul, where I worked previously, a lot of students who were paid researchers on this project. And so we built this as a test theory during the pandemic. And eventually Adam got to go when everything reopened to see if it worked. And I was calling him that whole day. Did it work? Did it work? Did it work? And it did, it worked. So we were able to augment this space with photos and create this new narrative throughout the Met. And so you
couldn't get a hold of me because I was walking around the Met crying like the entire time. I'm like, it's work.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, and listening to Rhonda's voice fill up this space, having the voice of a mother who lost her daughter fill up the space of the Met is everything, right? They never allow us to do this, and they still haven't really commented on this. They wanted to go away, but yeah, she couldn't get a hold of me because I was too busy crying.
And what was interesting, you know, for me, related to this was I spent a lot of time finding an attorney. So Brian Wassam, who's one of the leading AR attorneys, wrote a letter of support for this project to talk about free speech and how it is, you know, how it affects the arts, how what we were doing was not illegal because there weren't any statutes or case law yet. And so this became truly interdisciplinary work. We had to tap on a lot of experts in other fields to understand, and it was really a sort of excellent example of how tech moves really fast, and there aren't laws put in place really very thoughtfully, because again, like if you think of everything that's happening with AI right now, you have similar situations. This is also just another video I'll play where we also augmented the Met logo. So wherever there's a Met logo through the app, you see the video of Mariah. So it's really interesting, even from like a branding perspective, to think about the idea of taking over something like a brand logo.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Like when you went in there and picked it up, Mariah was like boom, 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 boom.
Everywhere.
This
Yeah.
stuff, you know, so that what Heather just mentioned there is actually one of the reasons why like, our collaboration has been really perfect, because we started doing this. I'm like, we're not talking to a lawyer, we're just gonna do it. Do the thing. And Heather has taught me how to slow down and think more thoroughly about the implications of my work. And I think I'm making me feel better about it. So it's been a good balance.
Yeah. I'm going to click through a little more quickly because I want to be mindful of time. I know we only have 5 more minutes, and Mariah has continued to evolve in so many ways. This project, called Funded by Loss, Death in Real Time, is a geolocative installation. So it's a death clock that the numbers go up in AR space at significant locations that have been also Sackler funded. And so this is at the Louvre. We're gonna both presenting at a conference there in May. And so we're gonna get to go see more of it in real life. But because of this idea that you can augment a space without having to be there, it's really an interesting form of activism and resistance, because really Mariah could be everywhere. This isn't entirely up to date.
You know what the clock is too. Like that clock is, it goes up by 1 number every 5 minutes. That's the interval of time that someone dies in the United States from overdose. So once you start that clock, it will infinitely go up 1 every 5 minutes in always. So the idea is any place in the world where a museum or institution or hospital decides to take the Sackler name down, they now get a death clock forever. As a reminder of that history, right? They've erased the history. Now they have this history that stays there forever.
And so these are, I think we've augmented more of these, the ones crossing them off as
on there are augmented.
Yeah. That's just so if you want to read a little bit more, but I wanted to get to strike through. So actually, let's start here. So the Mariah project was very nicely asked to both be included in the exhibition, but also bring the strike through exhibition outside the walls of the Letterform archive. We worked with Rhonda, Mariah's mom, to make sure she was okay with using her voice. That's really important to us as we work with these communities. And then we augmented 7 sites of protest throughout the Bay Area. I kept saying San Francisco, and I learned I was supposed to say Bay Area because it included Oakland. So this is us. I was like so nervous we were going to get in trouble. I kept sort of pretending I wasn't with these guys as we were doing it. Had black paint on our hands. This is sidewalk chalk, so you can see us. Originally we thought we were going to place these installations with geolocation, and we ended up doing them with trigger image. And so you can see right here in this picture, this was in the Tenderloin. So as your phone scans that stencil, again, it's just really a QR code. We have different forms of audio and video. Some are custom and some are pieces that are in the show at the archive that we've brought out into the physical environment. I'm going to play this reel, which is on the Letterform archive site, which gives you a sense of, we augmented a physical map, and you can see.
Mariah is an augmented reality app that narrates stories of historical injustice. A special version created for Letterform Archive's Strike Through exhibition prompts visitors to San Francisco area sites of protest to learn about objects in our gallery and the history of other local movements.
The creation of a war on drugs.
We are oppressed. We are exploited.
This is Harvey Milk.
Tap on this video from the link in our bio to see the list of historical sites and download the app.
Yeah, and so you can see that more.
Mariah is an augmented reality app that narrates.
So very quickly, we also made a documentary film, which got accepted into its first film festival, the New Media Film Festival. We made this with our partners down here. That's my daughter, who also helped. We've had so many people support this project in various ways. And so that will going to pick up at more and more film festivals. We don't have time to show you that today, but if you're interested in seeing it, it's a 17 minutes piece. I'm also currently working on a book that talks about using speculative design to proactively inform tech policy, and Adam's doing some policy work as well, more specific to the opioid epidemic. So again, just showing you all the ways that this has continued to grow. And a big thank you just to everyone at so many levels who has supported this project, really, so we can imagine the future together. And I just want to call out some of these people. Many of them are here. So many students, many people who gave us their home for filming. Of course, Rhonda, Brian Wassam, the attorney, my husband, the attorney, many, again, DePaul. This is a project that's very scary for some to fund because it's so subversive and it challenges power systems like it should. So we've been very lucky that DePaul University funded us in many significant ways throughout. This is privacy policy and credits. I do want to also note that we used the typeface redaction, which is a really beautiful activist typeface that's also in the Strike Through show. So we had serendipitously used that in it as well. You can find out more about the documentary on Film Freeway and IMDb. Never thought I'd be saying that. And our contact information here. So thank you again.
Thank you, you too. That was a fantastic overview. And I also really appreciate all of the thought and work and just internal reflection that goes into these projects. Hearing about that directly from you means a lot. And that's something we can't always get into a label in the gallery or even on the website. So it's really important that you're part of this, this way of presenting the work. And thank you for putting the time into that. So we're going to have a nice, good chunk of time here for discussion. And I'm going to bring in Silas Monroe, who is the curator of Strike Through, to join us for this. And we also have some good questions in the Q&A section. Anybody is welcome to add your own. I have questions of my own too, but I'm going to start with Silas. If you have anything that you want to start us off on, you're welcome to.
I'm just really blown away. Like I knew both of y'all's work was amazing, but it was just really nice to see it in the context of each other's presentation. I'm actually really curious if each of the two collaborators have questions for each other and what you might ask of each other's work, because I saw one of the themes of the way Strike Through was organized was this idea of call and response, and the idea in which activists and protesters through history are often dealing with similar issues or facing the same kinds of oppression, and often will also employ techniques or approaches that have a kind of echo or a resonance. So if I'd love to hear both pair ask each other a question about that, or to see the kind of threads or connections between both of your bodies of work.
I'm just so inspired by their work. So, I mean, it's nice to find fellow people.
I'm fascinated with what you do. I'm so bad with tech.
I'm bad with tech too, believe it or not.
Magic to me, but it's really impressive what you guys are doing. I guess partly I'm fascinated with how, when you're mapping a space, but you're not in the space, are you just using photos from the internet? Like how are you getting the images to map it without going?
Yeah, the way we did it, I actually got really lucky. Like we were talking about this right before things shut down with COVID. So I actually was in the Met. My wife and I were going through the Met with a notebook, and I was like, okay, this will be good. Write down all the tag information, take a photograph of something. And we were in there for like hours, like photographing everything we could. And then pretty much like a week later, everything shut down. So if we wouldn't have got in there, it probably would have been, we probably could have did it with images from the internet, but the way trigger images work, which is now I know more. I'm not a tech person either. Like I'm a printmaker. Like I'm not. So like the way what I learned was that, I mean, if it's not just the artifact that's being tracked, right? It's everything in the background of a photograph too. So the object is one thing, but the object has great shapes at kind of right angles around it. It tracks a lot better. And in our case, it was really difficult. We weren't sure it was going to work because everything in the Egyptian wing is like smooth sculptures, most of it. So we weren't even sure it was going to work. But then like miraculously, it did. So
see the question in the QA too, which is, I mean, essentially it's computer vision. So my camera scans the environment, it looks for data points. It works the same in facial recognition. It's the way it scans a QR code. A QR code works fast because there's so many unique points. So when you have a sculpture, it's looking for data points. We did have to do some innovative things, like we did photograph the sculptures in 3 different lights so that depending on the time of day you were in the museum, it would more easily find it. So Jake, who was one of our researchers, did that. And so, you know, I feel like with any emerging tech, you just play with toys play with apps that are made for kids. And you can learn something like AR and AI in a really roundabout way because you're in the space of play and not really like, you know, it's easier to break it that way, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't have a question. I have lots of questions I'm sure I'll have for both of you, but the one thought I have, and I just want to let you know, I'm going to inquire about something. It bothers me that the Library of Congress is not showing the image of your work.
I know.
I'm going to email, as soon as I get off this, I'm going to email the curator, Catherine Blood, about that. So I'm going to let you know that that image needs, I don't know why that's
being held at customs. That was amazing.
They might be waiting for the chance that he'll be president again to pass.
Oh, right.
There may be a season where.
But it's on our to-do list to, if you request an image to be made, they'd have to, you pay for it.
Yep, definitely.
They will have to do it, but I don't know if that means they will automatically load it on the Library of Congress. But we check it every now and then. It's okay, still no image.
Yeah.
I didn't have any, I think my question was maybe related to, I see a Q&A question about just how do you even conceive of a project like Mariah? Because I think sometimes when work is so resolved, it feels inevitable, it feels so natural. And for speculative work, the endpoint is fairly blurry, right? You don't really know where you're going. So I really appreciated seeing how you guys have sort of these dots in place and you start to connect them in different ways. And I arrived at something that I thought it was just, I love how subversive it is.
Yeah.
And it just makes it it's probably the broadest form of dissemination. And it's exciting to see where that can go. So it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. I was going to ask this as well, as about the idea, and I like how you opened it up, Adam and Heather, about the idea of speculative work being important. That, you know, often as designers, we have, you know, given a brief, or we're given a responsibility to have a certain solution to a problem, and instead of just going to explore and see where it takes us. And I think it's important to have that part of our practice where we, you know, or try something, even if we don't know if it's going to work or even what the end result might be, because that will lead us in directions that we wouldn't have anticipated. And we see that all the time when we show people work at Letterform Archive, because it's analog work, even though we're departing from the tech world a little bit here, but analog work often has that kind of capability of allowing exploration in some ways that the computer doesn't. And so when people come to see the physical materials, they often think, well, maybe I should be working with paper too more. Maybe I should be experimenting with analog tools, because it has that unpredictability factor to it.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, like literally the digital tool, like, I mean, it started with conversations between the two of us. Like Heather was hiding things in Google Street View. So like you go into Google Street View and all of a sudden there'd be like typography in there that she got past the algorithm. And I saw that, and I was doing projections on buildings at the same time. And I was like, okay, but wait a minute. And we talked about, like, was it possible? I think I started by asking her if she could put things in on like locations through Google Street View. And then that started conversations. Well,
oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
It's like, well, no, what about this thing called AR? And I'm like, I don't really know what the fuck I don't know what that is. And then it's like, we just tried things, and you know, it's, yeah. And
I feel like for me, someone asked about humor, and this isn't exactly humor, but I feel like all my best work comes from curiosity and kind of having the mindset of a child. Like I initially used AR, I was building QR typefaces, and I was making scavenger hunts in AR and with funny quotes from like weird movies, and it was kind of nonsense. And then with Google Street View, I was also making scavenger hunts. And so I learned that to upload a photo to Street View, I discovered if I embedded typography into the environment in a street sign, or it looked like a cloud, that it would pass and stay up there. So like at one point I had put the 7 words the CDC had banned, I put it in on the CDC headquarters, and I had to make like the word fetus and clouds. It was like the worst typography you've ever seen. It's not up. They finally took that down when the pandemic happened, but that was a place to play. Like, could I break the system? And I am also not really a technologist, but I like to mess around with it and try to break tools. And that's because I worked in big tech for so long. I think I like to find its vulnerabilities or use it in a different way, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But that's a really good thing, I think, for us and for our students to remember, is to be curious and to be fearless. I
Yeah.
think that
And
attitude.
find friends who know how to do it.
Yes, find friends in the right places.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I'll add about the strike-through version of Mariah that we didn't talk a lot about is that even though a lot of these stencils, well, a couple of them have been cleaned off, but a lot of them are still in place so that you can still use them around the Bay Area. But we also have a free map that when you come to the exhibition that we'll hand you, that you can, that has triggers on the map itself too. So you can see the result of the triggers even without visiting the sites by pointing it at the various spots on the map. So another question here is from Martin Flores, who asks, how do you consider effectivity or impact? I use a lot of humor in my work. You talked about this, but sometimes it falls flat. And how do we move beyond snarky jokes? Is there a place for humor? I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on that. I mean, all 4 of you have used in some way humor in your work.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Tommy Ungerer, and I feel like some of his posters were hard hitting, but they still had a sense of humor, partly based on his illustration style. So I think there's definitely a place for humor. It can be difficult, I think, with the Mariah project. It's probably extremely difficult because to be humorous in that context. But I think certain topics you could certainly,
If it's appropriate,
approach it with a sense of humor. But impact is a great question, and I think at the opening of the strike-through exhibit, I spoke a little bit about this idea of relevance or impact, and I said at the time, there's nothing I've ever designed that has saved someone from not getting killed by the police or kept Donald Trump from getting elected. I've never done anything that I can say this had an impact because it made this happen or it caused this or it definitely changed this person's mind. I have no, there's no way I can measure that. So I think I rely a little bit on the Martin Luther King quote, which is, with the best of your ability, even with your limited vision, you just need to speak up. And that's all, for me, that's the action of speaking or the action of making something. That's all I can worry about. I can't worry about anything else.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the things about the Mariah app too, and that's why I want you guys all to go and try it in the Met, is that the stories that Rhonda tells about Mariah, some of them are incredibly funny. And then the purpose of her telling those is that we need to make substance use disorder in the United States just that, a substance use disorder, something that is a small piece of someone's life and not all encompassing. So you learn about Mariah. At the end, you learn about the hard parts of what happened. But in the beginning, like one of the stories I'll share, which is, again, and that's how a designer could quantify or take something so huge and make impact with it. You take one story, like one moment, and that's what you talk about. And then that becomes everything, right? So like one of the stories that Rhonda tells, which I love, is that when Mariah was in 1st grade, she got called into school because Mariah was in trouble. And Rhonda was like, this is impossible. Like Mariah does everything. She's gymnastics. She's so involved. She's great. And what they wanted to tell her was that Mariah won't walk from class to class on her feet. She walked on her hands because she was a gymnast. So she would walk on her hands to class. So it's this human story that allows us to look at this huge number of deaths in a human way. And humor is one of the most important ways that we can do that, I think. It's an undeniable story. Every one of us that is a parent has a story like that about our children. And so even the hardest right-wing person who thinks that addiction is a choice and that it's not a brain disease and all this, they can't deny stories about their children that resonate in that way. Right?
Thinking about humor a lot too. I started having my students, when we do a reading or there's something happening in the world, instead of having them do a written reflection, we make memes, and they're all collected now on Arena, which is a great platform. And it's really therapeutic for all of us. And it's they engage with it really nicely. So there's so much power in something even as simple as memes.
What class is that you're teaching that they create memes for?
Which class?
Yeah. Like
UX research methods and visual principles for the screen. They're just web classes. Yeah. Is that what you asked me? Yeah, I know. So
yeah,
like we're making.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Yeah, I've thought.
Yeah,
about
I'll share them with you.
I'd love to see.
They're funny. I mean, and I think they like making them. They're probably listening to this right now. So I'm saying it like, I hope you like making.
Why don't we continue on with the education aspect? Because there's a question here that's directly to Mark, but I think any of you could speak to it in some way because you're all educators. And that's from Manager Ganesh, who asks, what are your thoughts on occupying institutional space as a white designer, an educator who is speaking to socio-political injustices that disproportionately impact POC communities?
I guess I'm trying to understand what are my thoughts on my taking up space at CCA. I mean, I'm trying to understand like what's the.
Maybe they can expand on it, but I think maybe it's more just about educational institutions in general, and what your impact can be within those institutions and also as an educator.
I mean, I think it's important, partly because I'm interested in agitprop and I'm interested in social justice. I often have assignments that are based around ideas that the students design agitprop work. So I don't do it every semester, but because of my interest in particular, I feel like I have a responsibility to allow the students to address topics of their interest. So, you know, if you're teaching a coding class, I'm not sure, you know, like, I don't know if every class needs to investigate ideas of social justice, but I think my class is definitely, I feel like I have a responsibility to try to integrate that into my curriculum.
And it's a natural extension of.
Yeah, and it's a natural extension of what I do and what I'm interested in. So I don't see it as a conflict or a problem. But I'm not sure if that answers
Manager's question.
Elisa, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I was trying to figure out if that question was really in regards to the thought of nothing for us without us, right? And so as we engage in activism of sorts, we have to make sure that we are not taking up someone else's space or that we're working with the communities, right? So in our case, we work very conscientiously with Rhonda, who's Mariah's mom, or with people who are part of the opioid epidemic or people, you know, immersed in tech. And so I think, I don't know. I mean, I think we think really hard about that. I'm not sure.
I think also like that's, I mean, the communities that we use for this particular project are ones that I cultivated over years of me traveling around the United States with other families like mine that lost people, right? So it came from a place of really deep research and community building, right? I mean, I met Rhonda. Rhonda invited me when Joey died. Like, I was not connecting with other people. I really went inside myself, and I didn't want to be around other humans. And she was really the one. After I did a projection on Purdue Pharma's headquarters, she reached out to me through social media and was like, hey, in a month, we're going to meet with 500 other families from around the country at Purdue Pharma. Like, I want you to come. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, I'm not sure I can do that. But my older brother and I went. And when I went there, I ended up finding this whole other family there. There's 500 other families from around the country that have lost people in the same way. And, you know, and at least for me, like building this network of people, like I've spent a lot of time kind of cultivating this new family, right? So I had that sense of responsibility when we do things like, so like Heather said, when we decided to do strike through, I was actually opposed to it right at the start because I thought it kind of might contradict what we did. So we had to talk to Rhonda first. Rhonda had to give us our okay and feel okay with it. And of course, Rhonda's like, I told her what we're going to do, and Rhonda's like, you got to go fucking do it. Like, go right now. Like, you have to do it. But that's, I think the only reason why we have that buy-in is because we've spent a lot of time cultivating those relationships to get to the point where we can, do that and do it in a legitimate way, maybe.
A question here from Joe Miller is asking to Mark and Angie about their thoughts on the continued promotion of the swastika as a symbol of hate, given its many centuries in history and continued innocuous use throughout Asia and even among indigenous North Americans. I'm not talking about the so-called rehabilitation of the swastika in regards to European perspectives, but the use of it in the global environment as a symbol of hate. I'm sure that's, probably has a section in your symbols book. I can't remember, but
yeah, it does. And we cover the history of it in the symbols book, and that it, the period under Nazi rule, it's very specific moment in time. Hi, Joe, by the way. I know Joe. We didn't use the symbol lightly, and we felt like Trump's demagoguery, even before he became president, was extremely dangerous not only to immigrants and people of color, but dangerous to the health of the country. And so we didn't use it lightly.
We've never used it before, and I hope we never have to use it again.
Yeah, I would love nothing more than to never design another Trump poster. I would love that. But I don't know. I mean, he's a dangerous enough candidate and personality that I don't regret using it. I know there's some folks who were deeply offended by it, especially people whose family members had died in the Holocaust. They took offense, which I understand. Curiously, we had other folks who also had family die in the Holocaust who helped fund the second poster, Trump, Lord of the Lies, because they felt it was their duty to get the message out, because they never wanted to see an authoritarian candidate again in this country like Donald Trump. So, it's a very difficult issue, but I also didn't want to shy away from making a statement.
But back to Joe's question, I think symbols are like language. They do evolve and shift and take on associative meanings over time. And I think so Joe's absolutely right. For most of human history, the swastika was seen as a positive life symbol. It's used on Buddhist temples and maps in Japan. But at this moment where we are now, it currently is a symbol of hate, and I don't know where it will evolve in the future. It's hard to tell from where we are now in history.
The thing that part of the reason why I wanted to use it was because Donald Trump kept saying "Make America Great Again." He wants sort of the rebirth of white 1950s America at the expense of everyone who isn't white, and it echoes some of the comments from Hitler, where he saw a rebirth of the German nation. He was wanting this pure country, and the echoes are a little scary. Germany first and America first. It's a little too tight. So Trump isn't a Nazi, but his rhetoric is right up to the edge, and I think it's just incredibly dangerous. So that's why we issued it as a warning.
And I think it's the artist's job to provoke also, right? So putting these things out there and having them cause hard feelings, the fact that we get people to ask a question about anything is a win, right? So even if so like another example in the same tone, like one of my favorite, I think probably the most important political artist working in the world is this printmaker named Suko. And she has a print that caused massive controversy that says, Auschwitz begins whenever you see a slaughterhouse and think there were only animals. She's an animal rights activist. So she now has kind of used this famous quote in juxtaposition with the killing of animals, and that was massively. There were certain communities in around the world that took massive offense to that. But the fact of the matter is, it started the conversation, and it came from a place of research and understanding. So that's what matters. I mean, I think the other part when it comes to protest work, if we spend all of our time worrying about how it's going to affect this community or that community, we're never going to make a fucking thing. Like, and right now, time is of the essence. We have to make this work now. Now, of course, we're trying to be ethical and be as respectful as we possibly can. But if we're waiting for permission to do these things, we're never going to get to where we need to go.
It ain't gonna come.
We had one other question about just advice on those who are, for those who are not coders, who want to get more involved in the kind of tech work that you're working on. And I think it's great to hear from you too on that, because you don't necessarily, you didn't start from that background. And I think I heard Heather say that she didn't actually get in the code. So there's probably a lot to talk about in terms of collaboration and teaming up with people who are experts in other areas.
I think I answered that question, and it's too hard for me to answer it well in the chat, but I just like to make friends with lots of people who can code, but also just reusing tools all around us. Like for those, predictive texting is a really simple form of AI, like on your phone, where you just keep pressing the buttons and you can learn a lot about the algorithm that's stored about you. So I really feel like playing with everything that's around you. Like I tried to put a scavenger hunt in Yelp reviews, right? That's like also trying to hack a system. So I feel like just this idea of a curious mindset. I went to Starbucks and gave a different name every time I went in. It was like performative hacking of a corporate system. So I don't know how to, I just think it's the easy way to start is to just be curious about all the tools we use every day. You can take an Alexa and a Google Home and make them talk to each other, and then they don't stop, and it's really funny. I don't know. So yeah.
The developers we worked with, like, we also had them doing things they've never done before. We're like, we'd like to do this thing. They're like, we don't know if we can do that thing. Well, can we try to do that thing? And then in a lot of cases, we're figuring it out. And now, like, I'm really excited. Like, this really amazing developer in Barcelona named Flor is who Heather met her at the Center for
School for Poetic Computation in New York. Yeah, on there. Yeah.
So she's the one that's really been helping us figure out how to make all of these crazy ideas work. So yeah, it was like again, I can't tell you how. I mean, I teach graphic design, but the tech aspects of things, like, it's not my bag, So it's collaborating with people, and also too, I will say, I think protest work that's going to have large societal impact can't be made in a bubble. We have to do it together. So I like that we're like, this is a talk here with like pairs of people that are working together. Because I think that's the only way we can have mass impact. I
mean, really, technological gatekeeping is a problem. And so I think it's really important to ask questions fearlessly, make friends in other spaces that do different things. Like interdisciplinary work is really the future of work. And so this idea that I don't, students all the time, or people being like, I don't code, I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to do that. It is really, that's almost what is wanted, right? So that we don't question these invisible systems. And so I ask all the questions. Literally in 2000, when I first worked with engineers, I asked them how the internet got through the wires, and they laughed. I mean, like, pleasantly, in spirit of my question. So you just can't be afraid to ask questions. So
when I was learning, like, Heather's like, here, look at this app. It's made for like 3-year-old kids. You can figure it out. Like,
I'm always playing with kid apps. Yeah.
We have just maybe 3 more minutes left, and a really great question came in just now from Cillian Kamson, who asks, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the effects of social media infographics and whether they've lessened the impact of political protest posters. I've always thought that hand-making posters is part of the communal process of protest, and wanted to ask if you have any fears of losing those tactile methods.
I can only speak for us. We're dedicated to analog and tactile methods, so I'm not concerned about us and that. As it's interesting, the social media infographics, I don't want to be critical of what other people are doing just because it doesn't interest me or, and because I've already said I have no way to track if any of my work is effective or impactful at all. So I can't, throw stones at other people who are focusing on social media graphics. All I can say is I love tactile physical objects, and I love the process of designing and printing. And I actually like physically putting them in a physical space, what I've created. So I don't know.
I think a couple years ago, every now and then we get this flurry of panic through the design community. The book is dead, print is dead. And here we are, 2023, print is alive, the book is alive. But maybe the applications are now more discriminating. Not everything needs to be printed. Not everything needs to be in the book. So, but the content that warrants it or merits it will be in print. And I think we'll just probably see a more even distribution of what's in print, what's in what's virtual, what's going to be enduring. And because one of the problems with digital work is, we have SideQuest drives and floppies that we can't open anymore. So sometimes things get outdated. But that said, I think there's a place for, I think the arena will just broaden, in my opinion. I don't have that worry.
Yeah, and there's a place for memes, obviously.
Yes.
It'd be kind of stupid to design a meme and put it on a poster, I think. The nature of it is to be online and to be shared or commented
But
on.
I look at it as our 12 box got bigger, not smaller.
Yeah, and the physical artifact, like I said, is mystical now, right? I mean, that's the one thing about the physical artifact that's so important. Like, so I did a poster bombing when the police destroyed my work the first time. A local business owner got a hold of me and was like, would you want to layer the entire front of my building in your posters? And I remember calling Silas on the phone and I was like, Silas, like, what do you think about this? And he's like, yeah, you should do it. And I was like, fuck, I know I'm gonna do, but I had to like leave for a residence. Like I screen printed like all day, like the next day, and then I covered the entire front of the building. And there was a picture taken that was in our local paper of this guy sitting with like a fitted cap on, like backwards, like you could see him from the back, like in front of this whole wall of posters. And then I was like, later on, like it was in the paper, and like a couple days later, I was like flipping through a John Hartfeld book, and there was an image from 1928 of a guy in a derby hat standing in front of a wall of posters that was like, so it was like 100 years later, the same method is being used. And it's actually in some ways probably more powerful now because of the digital artifact taking over. So physical artifacts are mystical and they're always going to be here and they really fucking matter.
Beautiful.
Well, as we close, do you have any parting thoughts, questions, Silas?
No, I'm just like taking away a lot of inspiration and just the reminder to just take action. And yeah, I'm just really moved by everything that was shared, and what a generous and generative discussion.
Yes, I ditto that. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking part. Thank you for the really provocative, interesting questions and discussion. As we said before, this recording will be live or will be available on our website for a week or 10 days after a week. And then it'll be available to members. And also the Strike Through exhibition will be open until April 16th. So there's 10 more days there to come and visit it. And then online, it'll be up permanently for members. So all of the links that we shared in the chat today, those will be available to Letter from Archive members going forward. Thank you, Heather, Adam, Angie, Mark, for being part of this. It was really an important thing for me to close the exhibition, to have you all speak. So appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Sarah, for organizing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Al.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.